The question, what is this movie about? The theme is the what of the movie is going to determine the style, the how of the movie. The theme will decide the specifics of every selection that's made in a movie over the following chapters. What a movie is about determines what's going to be made. Because the question in every shot, of course, is what happens next. This brings us to melodrama. Melodrama is a heightened theatricality that makes the implausible plausible. By going further, it seems more real. And it's also about something else, about nostalgia. Looking for the deeper themes of movies, not just their plots. Sidney Lumet goes on to say that The Pawnbroker is about the how and why we create our own prisons. Dog Day Afternoon is that freaks are not the freaks we think they are. Prince of the City's theme is when we try to control everything, everything winds up controlling us. Nothing is what it seems. Failsafe is that the machines are winning. 12 Angry Men's theme is to simply listen. Network's theme is that the machines are winning. Or for that matter, TV doesn't corrupt people. People corrupt people with TV. This brings us to the idea of bringing across themes as an auteur theory, and Lumet struggles with this quite a bit in the first chapter. He asks, how much in charge am I? Is this movie un film de Sidney Lumet? How independent am I making a film? I'm a boss, but only up to a point. I'm in charge of a community that I need desperately and needs me just as badly. However, in the intervening 20 or some years since Lumet wrote this book, we get into a big question about how digital technology is changing movies. He points out that the heart of his job, the decisive moment, comes when he says, print. For that's when everything they've been working for is permanently recorded. This is changing quite a bit now. Now, still, moving to the next physical setup in a film always requires tremendous commitment, but digital technologies allow us to go back and change things quite a bit, as Steven Spielberg and George Lucas have done with a lot of their later films. But, he says, what leads him to say print is completely instinctive. It's something that you get an aesthetic quality from watching other films. So this brings back up the question. He asks again, how free am I? He says, interestingly enough, he doesn't mind the limitations. Oftentimes the limitations, budget, time, crazy people on set, even stimulate you to better and more imaginative work. He goes on to quote a football coach from the 1980s, says it's all in the preparation. And that's what he goes on to describe in his long portion at the beginning of the chapter about the preparation that he makes when he is beginning to rehearse a film. In the preface, he points out that there are no personal revelations other than feelings arising from the work itself. This is not a celebrity bio and tell-all. What he's trying to do is to offer creative professionals a space to dream. And sometimes that's a thematic space, sometimes that's a writing space, and other times that is simply the constraints that we can put on the world when we are making film, when we are selecting particular bits of it. This is the power of constraints. And he goes on to tell an interesting story about Akira Kurosawa, a filmmaker that a lot of people really looked up to. He says, I once asked Akira Kurosawa why he had chosen a frame in a shot of his film Ran in a particular way. His answer was that if he'd panned the camera 1 inch farther to the left, the Sony factory would have been there in the setting exposed. If he'd panned 1 inch to the right, we would have seen the airport, neither of which belonged in a period movie. Only the person who's made the movie knows what goes into the decisions that result in any piece of work. They can be anything from budget requirements to divine inspiration. So, Lumet then points out that this book is about the work involved in movies. There's no right and wrong way to direct them. There are two other things that are connections to Chapter 1 first off, as he ends, is moving on to the idea of the writer. When Lumet is talking about his rehearsal, he points out that oftentimes the last person to show up is the writer, because the writer is the most exposed, the person who's going to be, as he says, sort of in the crosshairs. But writing, of course, is integrally linked to filmmaking, and that's why you're going to be doing a lot of it in this course. But not just writing films or treatments, but also other forms of writing that influence filmmaking, particularly criticism, film criticism, and how film criticism can affect the way films are made. So this brings us to about 5.5, 6 minutes. Please read Chapter 1 thoroughly, and any questions you can direct to me in the discussions and comments below. Have a great week.